what if? And to be honest with you, I'm tired of asking that question. I can't look back and think about what my life was going to be like if this didn't happen, because it did happen. My name is Chris Sandy. I'm an inmate at a Georgia State prison. My Georgia Department of Correction number is 108-3688. I'm here today for one reason. That is to make sure what happened to me never happens to any of you. See, as I walked in here today, I realized something. I realized that I've been where you are. I've been sitting in a high school just like this, listening to someone speak. I've been there. Thankfully, none of you have ever been where I am. And trust me, you don't want to be where I am. Before I was 16, I never even imagined about drinking, especially going in the 8th grade before I went into high school. I did not foresee myself drinking at all. I just thought that I was supposed to go play sports, and that was what my life was about. When we were in high school, we started going to a lot of different parties on the weekend. We had these keg parties out on these people's land. It was kind of out in the country, and we would go out there and drink, and then we'd all get in our cars and drive home. I would say that was probably the beginning of when I started drinking on the weekends. Seven years ago, I was 22 years old. I was trying to have fun. I was trying to enjoy life. But then on April 11th of 2000, I made a choice that night that I'm going to regret for the rest of my life. See, on that evening, I was at a party. At this party, I had 4 mixed drinks. Then my friend Jesse and we got a phone call from some of our friends. They were at another party. I hung up the phone. Jesse and I walked out to my car. I got into the driver's seat. Jesse, he got into the passenger seat, and then we drove off. I was in high school. Drinking and driving was somewhat common. Everyone thought they knew their limitations. I know I thought I knew mine, and especially by the time I was a senior, I had everything under control is what I felt like, and so did many of my friends. There was just a handful of us that were real worried about getting into a vehicle after someone had been drinking. As I was driving down this road, I had my radio up, and Jesse and we were cutting up and laughing. I started to get into a hurry to get to this other party. So I start flying down the road. I get up to like 80 miles an hour. The speed limit was 35. As I'm flying down this road, I drove up onto this white minivan. As I drove up on this white minivan, the only thing I was thinking about was getting to this other party to have some more fun. So I blew past him. And as I was passing him, down the road a little ways, I see this oncoming vehicle. They have their left-hand turn signal on. So I started gradually getting back over to my lane. As I was getting back over to my lane, I see this gold flash shoot in front of my face. Then bang! I hear this incredibly loud and solid sound. Then everything went black. When my tires came to a stop, that's when I opened my eyes and I found myself pinned on the passenger side dashboard. I couldn't hardly breathe. The only thing I could think about was just trying to find some way to get out of my car. I managed to pull myself over the driver's side seat and crawl out the driver's side door, where I had to lie there on the side of the road. I couldn't stand up. My right leg had been dislocated from my hip and rolled around on my back, and where my knee had slammed into the dashboard, it was bleeding severely. Thankfully, shortly after the crash, this man came running down to me to let me know he had called for help and that help was on their way. Of course, I was in tremendous amount of pain. I started to fall in and out of consciousness. The next time I regained my consciousness, there was this officer standing over me. He asked me, he said, "Do you know how fast you were going?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, is there somebody I can contact for you?" I think I gave my mother's name and number. But then he was knelt over me, and as he was knelt over me, he said, "Have you been drinking?" And I immediately said no. I did not want to go to jail for a DUI. I was already thinking it was bad enough that my car was crashed and that Jesse and I's night was ruined. But as I was lying there, I heard someone yell something in the background. And the words I heard yelled that night, I will never forget for the rest of my life. because while I was so worried about possibly going to jail for a DUI or worried about what happened to my car, I heard someone in the background yell, "There's a fatality on the scene. There's a fatality on the scene." As soon as I heard those words, I knew that somebody had died. I just couldn't believe that something like this was actually happening to me. The only thing I could do was just lie there and pray to God that this was just some horrible nightmare. I was going approximately 77 miles per hour. Now, the reason they know that is because they took a photograph of my dashboard, and my speedometer was stuck at 77 miles an hour. As I was trying to get back over to my lane, the oncoming vehicle, the one with their left-hand turn signal on, it was a big four-door sedan. They tried to make a left-hand turn into a driveway. As they made that turn into the driveway, I could not stop, and I plowed right into the rear passenger door, completely driving through that car, cutting it almost in half, leaving the front half of the car around the driveway. And then the back half, it was ripped off that vehicle and dragged 100 feet down the road with my car. The passenger in that car, her name's Mrs. Nellie King. She died on impact. And the driver, Mr. William King, he and I were life-flighted to a hospital. And that is where Mr. King died several hours later. Next time I remember opening my eyes, I looked around. I noticed I was lying in this hospital bed in this hospital room. The only thing I could do was look up at the ceiling and think to myself, man, I just killed 2 innocent people. They're dead. They're dead. The people who were killed in that crash, I didn't know anything about, never heard of them. But later on, I found out who they were. I found out that they were somebody's grandparents and that they were real well known in the community that this crash occurred at. They were some very good, very, very good people. I know that they came from a very large family. And I know that family has been hurt tremendously because of this. I cannot imagine what that family is going through because of my choice. The physical pain was gone after like 6 to 8 weeks. It was over with. The emotional pain, that's never going to go away. I mean, nothing in this world will ever bring those two people back, and nothing in this world will necessarily give back to my parents what they've now experienced or given back me my life entirely. This is something that will haunt me for the rest of my life, and that emotional pain will not go away. The plea bargain, it was reached between the victim's family and the state of Georgia. It said that I'd have to serve 13 years in prison and then complete 17 years of probation. The whole sentence had to equal 30 years. Judge read the sentence off to me, gave me a moment to speak afterwards if I had something to say to the victim's family, and of course I did. Although when I turned around, I wanted to have one last look at my family before I went to prison. I tried to look at them, but they were crying so hard, I just immediately turned, I looked at the victim's family, and then I tried my hardest to apologize. But it didn't matter what I said to him. It was like the whole time I talked to him, I was speaking to him with empty words. I could not change what I'd done. And once I was finished, they came out and they handcuffed me and they escorted me out, and that was my last moment of freedom. On June 1st of 2001, I left to go to this prison. I was scared to death. As soon as we pulled up to the prison, there was so much razor wire on the outside of the fence, you couldn't hardly see through it. Then we pull up through these 2 gates and we get out onto this blacktop and we unload off this bus. There are these correctional officers standing outside screaming and shouting at us. We then go inside this room. It's called the intake room. As soon as we walk in there are these 4 yellow lines laid out. We all have to stand on those yellow lines together. We then strip butt naked, go into a shower, and they spray us down with this stuff that delices us. Then they give us a white jumpsuit, a pair of boots, sit us in a chair, and shave all of our hair off our head. The first night I had to spend in in Jackson, and that cell door had closed. And I was locked inside that little cell. I was quite naturally scared to death. I didn't know what kind of person was in the cell with me. I couldn't believe that I was actually in prison. I was terrified. The only thing I could do was just lie there on my bed that night and think to myself, I still have like 4,684 days to go, and that this was only my first night.